thanks for bearing with us. We appreciate you joining us back for the afternoon session. There's no easy way to do this, but before I introduce Catherine and Jenny, who are our speakers at 1 o'clock, I want to have a moment of silence, because when we were here in 2019, there were 2 candles that were out for GNAO1 warriors who passed too soon. Unfortunately, as you know, we've lost more warriors since then. So I want to have a moment of silence for Noah, Alex, Max, Kenzie, and others in our community. So please join me in a moment of silent reflection. Thanks very much. I know that's a hard way to come back, but I think it is a reality that many of us face as caregivers. And so I think it's important for us to think about as we enter this next conversation, because this next session is really about difficult topics and caring for ourselves, right? Putting your own mask on before you put the mask on for the child sitting next to you on the airplane. So we're joined by 2 extremely skilled individuals who have a lot of experience in this space. Catherine, who's a licensed counselor in the state of Missouri with experience providing therapy to families and adults in a variety of settings, with a particular emphasis on supporting parents. We're also joined by Jenny Jesse, who some of you may remember from the last conference we held in St. Louis. She's the executive director of the June Jesse Memorial Foundation, a nonprofit focused on providing relief and support to children with devastating medically complex conditions and also their family. So they're here to talk to us for about the next hour. We thank you all for joining us and look forward to hearing your presentation.
Got a glimpse of my picture several times there. So hi, I'm Catherine. Today I'll be presenting on caregiver self-care and mental health. So a little bit about me. I'm a licensed professional counselor. I work here at St. Louis Children's Hospital and Washington University School of Medicine. Thanks to generous funding from the June Jesse Memorial Foundation, I get to be a designated therapist for the families of the neurology community here at St. Louis Children's. So I work specifically with parents who have young children with neurological conditions. This program currently serves parents who have children ages 0 to 5, but we do have some exceptions. And I'm licensed in Missouri, Illinois, and Oregon, if anyone would be interested in follow-up services or have questions. Another resource that we offer for families that travel from outside the St. Louis or Missouri area is I can help you find support in your community if you've traveled a long distance to be here today. So I wanted to provide my contact information if you are looking for support groups or any sort of counseling. And that's my cell phone number, and you're welcome to call it. It's my work cell, so I don't typically answer on weekends, but it's there if you would like it. Today, I'll be going over some mental health facts, a general overview of self-care with some examples and exercises, and navigating professional help if you would choose to do that. They're broad topics, and I'll be covering them pretty briefly. So I have provided some resources if you're attending virtually, or if you don't have time to stay for the breakout sessions. There will be some concrete takeaways. There are some links in the slides, and I believe this presentation will be made available to you after the conference. Before I get started, I want to say that caregiving is extremely difficult and that you're all doing great work. I have families I work with, and one mom in particular stands out. She says, yeah, I'll add that to the list, which is short for the list of things I will never do. And I don't want this to feel like that. I don't want this to be guilt-inducing in the least. What I will be talking about today is generally doing less or doing things a little differently. And everything I suggest today, I hope will be something that takes up very little of your time and offers some sense of relief. I don't want it to feel like a to-do list. So if it starts to feel that way or like something unreasonable, please raise your hand. Please share your specifics with me. Moving from there, I do work specifically with parents like you, and there are therapists in our Heart Center as well as our NICU. And when we pool our data together, we find that about half of all the parents we interview are experiencing some clinically significant symptoms of anxiety, depression, or trauma disorders. This is not meant to scare you. It is meant to validate. If you are feeling overwhelmed or if you feel like you struggle with any sort of mental health concerns, you are not alone. About half of all the parents that we meet on a daily basis are going through that. And we know that the pandemic has made things worse. It has been very, very hard the last 2 years. Of the general population of parents, 62% in a recent study reported, 62% of the parents we interview at Children's describe having a mental health diagnosis, but only 17% currently have a therapist or psychiatrist. And they're citing time, who has the time for that, and also finances for not caring for themselves or their mental health diagnosis. In March of 21, the American Psychological Association surveyed the general population of parents, and 39% of mothers and 25% of fathers said that their mental health had worsened since before the pandemic. And we're seeing that's about twice the frequency of when they were interviewed prior to the pandemic. And then a study conducted by the World Health Organization that specifically asked parents who describe themselves as unpaid caregivers of children with a medical diagnosis. 67% were saying that they experienced mental health concerns or challenges during the pandemic. If you're wondering what it might look or feel like, it can present in many different ways. Most commonly, I see a lot of anxiety. It can feel like ruminating thoughts, intrusive thoughts. You're doing something else and then something pops into your head, feeling more irritable or having less patience, or having what feels like compulsions or an inability to interrupt routines or certain habits. Sometimes it can be mood, which is a mental health way of talking about depression. A mood disorder is a depression disorder. And that can lead towards negative self-talk towards yourself, negative talk towards others, feeling kind of a decreased energy outside of the decreased energy of being a parent and a caregiver, more significant than that. Feeling down, feeling a little helpless or hopeless. It can impact our bonding. So sometimes I see families that on the anxiety side are maybe more hypervigilant. This sometimes manifests with parents watching their children sleep or co-sleeping with them. And I know some of that is required, but if it is optional, some parents have a very difficult time walking away or trusting that other caregivers will be doing the kind of watching that they would do. It can also lead to some avoidance when families find themselves in the hospital. Sometimes if there is a mood disorder, it can make it feel unbearable to be there in the hospital, or if there's untreated trauma, there can be a strong difficulty in being in the room or seeing some of the procedures done. It can impact our interpersonal relationships, your primary relationship with your spouse or partner or immediate family, and sense of self. So sometimes when I ask parents what they do to take care of themselves, or if they had time, what they would like to do to take care of themselves, there can be that uncertainty, not remembering what they like to do for themselves. So trained in taking care of others first. Specific to the families I work with, I see a lot of medical related trauma. For some families, it looks a lot like post-traumatic stress disorder. For others, it's maybe an adjustment disorder with trauma-like symptoms. This can lead to vigilance, hypervigilance, a lot of watching, checking, double, triple checking certain things. Like I talked about before, avoidance of places or rooms where things have happened. Here at Children's, there's that bridge from the parking garage to the units, and parents will talk about their heart rate kind of increasing as they walk over. They're reminded of hospitalizations that were very difficult, or seeing some things that were extremely hard to get out of their mind. The sights and smells of the hospital can also be very triggering for families and caregivers. Sleep can be interrupted with nightmares or difficulty falling asleep. And intrusive worries, flashbacks can come. Maybe you're in the highway and you see an ambulance go by, and if you've had an ambulance ride with your child, you might be taken back to that time and place. And so some of the work in addressing this medical trauma is identifying the triggers and coming up with plans to ground yourself in those moments and also take care of yourself and alleviate some of the distress that this can cause. Two strategies that I use here at Children's were developed for people who experience ongoing and persistent trauma. This can look like medical workers who work in intensive care units. The first was adapted from the National Child Traumatic Stress Network, and it's Pause, Reset, and Nourish. And both of these will be handouts that I'm linking to if you'd like to use them. And I have them in the breakout groups as well. And the 3 R's, reflect, release, and reconnect. And I'll be talking in detail up in the breakout rooms. But the second one, the 3 R's, was developed here by our trauma specialists to help medical providers who experience day in and day out traumatic experiences. So a parent vignette, I thought I would share kind of like a typical person that has come to me through this program, and maybe some of you can relate to a little bit of what they were going through. So I will not be describing any personal details, and I have sort of mashed a couple of patients together to protect their privacy. But a typical mom that has come to me presented after an IEP meeting at her child's school, where there was, as she described it, an outburst, like feeling like she couldn't control her anger anymore, just a lot of frustration, feeling anxious, always feeling like something bad is going to happen, these ruminating thoughts, hypervigilance of checking everything, trying to anticipate any possible snag or bump in the road, and being very hard on herself if she would miss anything, or if she would oversleep, or if she would run late for something. Little restless sleep, because she was checking her child several times in the night, even though she had not been told by her doctor to do that. It's something she felt she needed to do. Sleeping separately from spouse and describing them as sort of ships in the night. She would be awake most of the night, and he would rest in what was their shared bed, and they would kind of pass in that way. And she described her panic as head buzzing and kind of a knot in her stomach. And so the treatment that we worked was first to identify the stress that was going on in her life, thinking about this being a time when it felt like a lot of doors were closing to her. The treatments that they had wanted to explore were not working the way they had hoped. And her child was ruled out for the possibility of future treatments or alternative treatments. And so we sort of normalized that for anyone. Like anyone in that circumstance probably would have yelled at the IEP meeting. They would have felt that buildup of grief, years of grief and frustration and disappointment. And it does have to come out in some way. And so without shaming her, if we look at that one moment, she might feel like a crazy person yelling into school. But without shaming her, noticing that anyone in that particular circumstance probably would have reacted the same way. And using CBT, and I've also trained a type of therapy called DBT, which is very focused on non-judgmental self-talk, and also sort of identifying the thoughts that go into this, the anxiety symptoms, finding skills that worked for her, and really looking at the thought patterns that trigger the emotions and then trigger the behaviors. They had a couple of couples sessions, 2 to 3 couple sessions, where they worked on supporting one another, addressing some of the disparities where mom had taken on a lot more of the caregiving and dad had felt sort of disconnected. And so working on balancing that a little better. And also just increasing some communication strategies, or coming up with a sort of shorthand where they could, in a loving way, sort of express their needs, but not, it wouldn't take a full therapy session. They could come up with these little shorthands for each other. And this person also received a psychiatry referral through our service and has participated in some of the JJMF groups and also community events. Okay, so when I look for images of self-care, this is what comes up. It is like very pink, you'll notice. It's there's a phone, lounging in beds, there's a bubble bath with a book and flower petals. And I think this is kind of what makes it feel so hard, or why that mom said, yeah, I'll add that to the list. Like, I don't know who gets to spend Saturdays in a bubble bath with a book. If you are already doing that, you don't need this talk. You can go get some coffee, because it's really hard. And if you have a life that looks like this is wonderful. And I don't fault these people at all. I wish this was something that we could do as parents, that we would have space for something like this. But when it looks so curated or like social media perfect, I think it feels inaccessible. Like it's not for people like us. We don't have time for that in our days. And so I try, if the word self-care is already like too tainted for you, then change it, just decide what you would like to call it. I talk about it being restorative over performative. If you feel peer pressure, if you feel like you need to take a selfie during it, it might not be self-care. So it's basic definition, it's caring for your body, mind, and spirit, doing something that's really healing for you or caring for you. And that first starts with you knowing your own needs, knowing your own wants. So something like a body scan where you're really just checking in with how your body feels in a moment can be helpful. And defining it for yourself, not allowing like the latest social media trend or like face mask that's popular to define self-care for you, but really asking yourself what would be nourishing in this moment or restorative in this moment. It can look like saying no. It can look like saying, I don't have time for that. Social media breaks, going to your own doctor's appointment, setting healthy boundaries with people in relationships, or not signing up to volunteer for something. Self-care can look lots and lots of ways. Does anyone have examples of their own self-care that they'd want to share? Emily?
Do I get a rebuttal to that? No, she's right. I mean, my self-care is out in the woods, enjoying nature, waking up, watching it wake up around me. Find a way to balance that with still being a dad and present, is something that I think the focus is for me more, right? I've got a hobby. I can sink myself into it 100%. Can't do that and still be all things to all the people that I need to be.
Yeah, and the act of self-care is probably when you decide to set aside that time for yourself, when you're out there and you're experiencing it. Yeah, and I do appreciate, the sentiment in some of these pictures. I would not write a note to myself that says self-care isn't selfish, but like that you feel better afterwards, or that you feel like you're a more present dad when you come back from an experience like that is really important. I do want to check on time. I wanted to leave time for Jane. Are we presenting until 1:30 or 1:40? Okay, great. Then I have some exercises that I'll go through. I also have them for the breakout group, so I can go through this quickly, or I could take a little more time. This is not conclusive or definitive, but I like to think about different elements of self-care, or addressing your mental health, or just generally taking care of yourself. They can be broken up into many categories, and you might find that from different days or different moments, you have different needs, or different parts of yourself that need attended to. So the ones in bold are not more important. They're just what I'm going to be discussing today. But I wanted to just have this visual of thinking about it in this holistic way, that there are many different parts of ourselves that might need attended to at different times. So today I'll be specifically presenting exercises on emotional, social, and spiritual. So for emotional self-care, one strategy I wanted to bring up was self-talk. And just thinking for a moment about your internal narrative. So when you look in the mirror, when you're running late, what are some things that are going through your mind? Are you talking to yourself the way you would talk to a friend or even a stranger, the person at the checkout counter at the grocery store? Or are you talking to yourself in possibly a harsher or more negative way? You hold yourself to a higher standard than you hold other people to. And if you're answering yes to some of those questions, or if you're feeling like your narrative is maybe a little harsh or something that you would like to work on, some strategies I suggest are checking the facts. So that's approaching a situation the way a reporter or a scientist might, and you just describe it. It can also be helpful in times when you're feeling trauma reminders, because it grounds you to reality and the time and the place that you're currently in. And so when I'm late for my kids, I think, what's wrong with me? What was I even doing? This is my same schedule every day. Or I could say, I'm 10 minutes late, one day out of 250 days. And you could see how one of those might lead me to a place of acceptance faster than the other. And one of those might take a toll on my overall sense of well-being, my overall self-esteem, and one is just more fact-based. And so that's a strategy that I use a lot for myself and also recommend for the families I work with. If you're finding yourself judgmental of yourself, the opposite of that is curiosity. So trying to understand why you're having these thoughts or what exactly is going on. And small, consistent acts. So things that you're already doing in your daily life, showering. If you could bring a little bit of loving kindness to that, or appreciation for yourself in the acts that you're already doing. You can do this through mindfulness, which I'll be discussing in a couple minutes. Even just being in the shower and thinking, I deserve to be loved, I deserve to be cared about, I deserve to feel good, instead of, I need to go to the grocery store, I need to go to the grocery store, I need to go to the pharmacy. Being able to use what you're already doing in a way that feels more restorative or more nourishing for you. And then I listed Dr. Kristen Neff here, and I've linked to her in the citations as well. She has a lot of free guided meditations on loving kindness that sort of push back on that negative self-talk that a lot of us experience. And then shared here, the connection between feelings, behaviors, and thoughts. This is, if you've been in any sort of therapy, you've probably seen this. It's a very commonly used therapeutic tool. How we think affects how we feel affects our behaviors, and they're all intertwined. So if you can address your thoughts, you can shift your behaviors. Emotional regulation is about finding your window of tolerance. This is another commonly used therapy exercise. Hypoarousal is often described as a depressed mood or a down mood, and it's when we have trouble motivating ourselves to do important things. Window of tolerance is when we're doing the things we need to do without too much distress. And hyperarousal is where I find most of my families that I work with, just very stressed, always on high alert, always waiting for the next thing to happen, and anticipating a lot of needs. And we're not as productive in that space, which is why, if for no other reason, I'd love for you to do self-care because you deserve it and it's pleasant for you, but if for no other reason, it makes us more effective. It makes us more attentive and skillful caregivers. Social relationships, I sort of mentioned in the patient vignette, the parent vignette, looking at the division of caregiving and household labor, it's going to be there. It is what it is. Like your load of labor is going to be the same, but maybe you and your partner or you and somebody in your family can talk about different tasks that you'd like to swap or trade, or you need help with this thing. I often see that one parent typically becomes the primary decision maker, or the one that attends most of the appointments. And sometimes the other parent can feel like they're not as attuned to what's going on or don't have the latest information. And so really keeping that dialogue open. A good use of medical binders. A lot of the families I work with have this binder of everything about their child, all the medications, all the doctors, all the therapies, and using that as kind of a training manual for potential babysitters, extended family members who could be caregivers, and your own partner, and just making sure everybody is literally on the same page of knowing this, so that one parent isn't sort of the walking encyclopedia for their child. As best you can, regular check-ins for that family that described themselves as ships in the night. This was like 5 minutes a week, but it was 5 minutes dedicated to discussing their marriage, their relationship together. Some exercises that I use will be linked in the citations as well are love maps and State of the Union exercises. And these are both just series of questions that help you connect and know the emotional needs of your partner, and also help you comfort them. And for single parents, I do work with several single parents right now, and we talk a lot about reclaiming a support network. For years, feeling like the automatic response was, it's just easier if I do it myself. I'll just do this because I know how. And in that moment, it was true. But after 3 or 4 years of doing it every single day, it's not necessarily true anymore. And so reaching back out to family and friends and seeing who could be a potential caregiver and how can I train them, what information do they need to know. Some families make videos and keep them on a Google Drive, or like I said, the medical binder, just having some shared stored knowledge so you can balance out your relationships and feel like you're getting the support that you need. Spiritual can mean anything, which is why I've included this lovely picture of a dog, because when I saw it, it made me feel happy. And so for your own spirituality, it might feel that way. When you feel it, it clicks for you. It makes you feel a sense of relief or connection. It doesn't have to be prayer, but it can be prayer. If you're a religious person, it could be being outside. That might be where it connects for you. There's some alleviation deep within you, and this feels right for me, or this is good for me. It can help you define your meaning and your bigger purpose, seeing yourself as part of a larger ecosystem. It can take us sort of outside of our day-to-day stressors and see us as a part of a bigger community, and also lean on the support of a bigger community. And so if you're not sure where to start, I think reflecting on times when you did feel connected to others, or there was something that just brought a smile to your face and you're not quite sure why, and using that curiosity and trying to understand what about it was helpful. Was it the group? Was it the setting? Was it the exercise? What was helpful or nourishing? Sometimes this can look like self-development. If you've got a hobby or a passion or something you just really want to learn about, taking that time to develop yourself or your interests, and using your senses, feeling, it's hard for me to describe in a slide here, but that sense of sort of relief. I see some nods, so I think some of you have that idea of when you've been spiritually connected or when you've experienced some sort of alleviation of your stress. Are there any examples that anyone would like to share? Yeah. Paint, yes. Yeah, it's hard to put it into words, isn't it? And for me, I think about like a puzzle piece going to place. Like when you paint, there's something that happens and you get to be fully there, it sounds like. Which leads to mindfulness. Mindfulness is thrown around a lot like self-care, but it has been well researched since the 1980s. It's evidence-based in alleviating chronic stress and depression symptoms. And a practice of 5 to 10 minutes a day can be effective in reducing chronic anxiety. It's paying attention to one thing on purpose. It doesn't have to look like sitting cross-legged in meditation, but it's about you being in control of where your thoughts are going and turning the mind in ways that are effective for you. So I've linked to a couple of those exercises as well. And I've also provided a research overview if you're interested in the science behind it. There are lots of ways to practice. If you are interested in professional mental health care, you're welcome to ask me any questions, but I like to stress that you do not need to be in crisis. The patient vignette I presented was a mom that had felt a moment of crisis and then sought help, but you can, whenever you need support, there are therapists out there. And there are programs like this in the NICU of other places, and there are lots of community therapists. It's a privilege to be here today because it's hard to find people that specialize in this sort of work, but I hope that it's becoming more common. And even though I get nervous talking, I never turn down an opportunity to talk about this and increase awareness about caregiver mental health for your population, for families like yours. It can look a lot of different ways. It does not have to be sitting on a couch talking to a therapist. It could be groups, it could be informal groups, peer groups, individual couples. You could go as a family. There are call and text lines, which I will present in the final slides. And Facebook meetups and things like that. You guys have this community, so I'm sure you're plugged into some great resources. When I encourage families to look for help is when anxiety or depression or trauma-related disorders are impacting functioning. If you feel like you are not able to sleep, to eat regular meals, or do the things that are important to you to do every day, that's when I really encourage folks to seek professional help. But anyone is welcome to. Some resources. My job is under the perinatal program, so I refer people to the National Maternal Health Line and Postpartum Support International, because I do work with those parents of really young kids. There's also a national crisis text line. And for finding a therapist, I use Psychology Today, BetterHelp, and Good Therapy. You can search by insurance, zip code, and specialty. And I find those all to be pretty helpful. You can also email or reach out to me. The exercises I'll have at the breakout groups are listed here, but for anyone watching this later or through Zoom, I've linked to all of those there. And then my citations. And yeah, I'll turn it over to Jenny. And then if you have questions afterwards, I'm happy to answer those.
Hi, everyone. Hi, I'm Jenny Jesse, and I'm the co-founder and executive director of the June Jesse Memorial Foundation. And I'm really excited to be here with you today to tell you about our programs and talk about caregiver wellness. It's something that's really important to me, and it's why my husband and I started the June Jesse Memorial Foundation in 2016. So in order to tell you about the June Jesse Memorial Foundation, I have to tell you about our daughter, June. And I know the severity of the cases of children with GNAO1 vary. But like many of your children, June had a severe neurological disorder and other medical complexities, but she was undiagnosed. So June was born in April of 2012, and I had no idea that there was anything wrong with her health when I was pregnant. The only sign that something might be wrong was when she failed the newborn hearing screening at the hospital. 2 months later, she started having infantile spasms, which is a severe seizure disorder with a very poor prognosis. Then after that, she started having vision problems, kidney problems. Then she started having feeding issues. And like many of you, we were thrown into this world of unknowns, going to one specialist after another, and we were always coming away with more questions than answers. So little by little and one by one, her health mysteriously deteriorated until she died 2 months shy of her 4th birthday. And she was in my arms and she was surrounded by her dad and her baby brother. When June passed away, we wanted to honor her legacy by creating a resource that we wished had existed when June was alive. And it's just to help guide parents and just make their lives easier as best we can. And our work is inspired by her bravery and all of your brave children too. I'm honestly inspired by every single one of your children that I'm able to meet, that I have the pleasure to meet. But and our goal is to assist families by providing relief and to help them recharge. And I will go through our programs that are open to all of you in just a moment. In the last few years, JJMF has evolved into something even more than I could have imagined when we first created it. And, you know, our goal is just to make your journey easier. So now I'll tell you a little bit about our programs. And so through a partnership with St. Louis Children's Hospital, we fund free mental health care for caregivers. So Catherine's work that is funded by our foundation. And we also offer many programs that are easily accessible to families outside of the local St. Louis area. We provide financial assistance. We provide financial assistance and our applications are accepted year round and we review them every other month. And that is on our websites. And you can use the funds for respite care, medications, equipment, therapy, really anything medically related for your child. We also have virtual music therapy sessions that are held monthly over Zoom. For me, music therapy was one of my favorite things to do with June. It was just such a bonding experience for the two of us. And I also loved connecting with the other parents in the music class. And it's also great for siblings. Our music therapist is specialized in children who working with children who have neurological disorders. So she's really great. We also have trauma-informed yoga once a month. And it is provided by a specially trained instructor who focuses on trauma, people who have dealt with trauma. And we even have an on-demand yoga class on our website right now. So you can check it out after this if you want. It's amazing. It really helps you tune in to like the mindfulness that Catherine was talking about. If you have a hard time, I know I can't just do that on my own. I need to be guided by somebody, at least initially, and she really helps you with that. Throughout the year, we also have some educational opportunities for caregivers as well as healthcare professionals. Later this month, we're hosting a lectureship at Children's Hospital in which Washington University med students will engage with field experts to advance patient care during pediatric grand rounds. And we also have navigating neurological conditions, which is an educational program, and we provide resources and content from experts to help make families' journeys easier. Most recently, we interviewed a marriage and family therapist to help give advice or tips on how to keep the relationship strong while caring for your child. In addition to the educational opportunities, we provide several opportunities for families to recharge and connect. And these include in-person events. If you're in the St. Louis area, we have many virtual events as well. Later this month, we're going to have an outdoor music therapy followed by a family picnic. We're also going to have a parents' night out later this month, but we have virtual coffee talk, and that's usually moderated by Catherine. That's quarterly. And if you join our email list, you'll get notified about that. And we also have a private Facebook page. And all of these resources are on our website at junejessie.org. And a big area, just a look ahead for us is I am really interested in respite for families. It's the #1 question that I get asked by caregivers is, how do I find affordable and reliable respite care? It's something that I experienced with June. All of you experience it too. And it's really something that with the foundation, I want to look towards providing respite solutions for families. Short term, we're taking several steps, and we're currently working on educational materials to show the need specifically to legislators and the community about respite. I think many people are misinformed about what is available to us, and they think that more is available to us than it is. And it's not until we start talking about it that they know that there's nothing, at least in Missouri, but I don't know how it is in other states. So this is how you can connect with me. I love connecting with parents. So that's our website, junejessie.org. On social media, you can reach out to me and send me a message on our website too. It goes directly to my inbox. And I hope you get involved in some of our programs, especially the ones out of town, our virtual ones.
Thank you, Jenny. Thank you, Catherine. You've given me a reason to tell Emily she needs to take a lot more trips. That's what she enjoys to do. And you've also given me some ammunition when I try to go back to Alaska for another hunting trip. So I really appreciate the speech. Our next speaker is Mary Heck. Mary Heck is a certified child life specialist at St. Louis Children's Hospital. She's the certified child life specialists are educated and clinically trained in the developmental impact of illness and injury. Many of y'all might have talked with Mary earlier. She's graciously helped us with the art and behind the scenes, and she's also brought some great toys for the little ones to play with while we're here. So Mary, we really appreciate you going above and beyond with us today. She serves as the inpatient neurology unit, or in the inpatient neurology unit, seeing patients with neurological conditions as well as neurosurgery patients. As an expert in child development, Mary is able to use specific interventions to support patients, siblings, and families as they communicate challenging circumstances. So Mary, we'll turn to you and appreciate you being here.
Hi there. Thank you guys so much for giving me a few minutes of your time today to talk a little bit about sibling relationships. As was stated, I'm a certified child life specialist at St. Louis Children's Hospital, working on our inpatient neurosciences unit, where I see patients with all different variety of neurological conditions with all different courses of treatment. But the most important thing about the field of child life is that it's not exclusively patient related, it is family-centered care. So my expertise goes all the way into all of the ways that we help and educate our families, specifically siblings who are of the developmental ages that we are experts in. And so, excuse me, working with the families on the neurology unit, we see a lot of patients with chronic issues and chronic illnesses and frequent hospitalizations and things that make an impact on the entire family. And it's really important that we consider how siblings are affected by these conditions. Oftentimes, siblings can become sort of the unintentionally forgotten participants in a chronic illness because the life adjustments that are happening don't always center around the siblings. And so it's our goal as child life specialists, whether it's in the hospital or out in the community, to help support siblings in both understanding the chronic conditions of their siblings, but also to make the adjustments necessary in their their life to continue to thrive and have those sibling relationships that we know are so important and have them as a positive experience in their lives. And so in order to understand how sibling relationships are affected in the context of chronic illness, it's first important to have an understanding of how the general overview of sibling relationship looks. And so the majority of children around the world have siblings. And in fact, the sibling relationship is likely to be the longest lasting relationship a person has throughout their lifetime, especially given some of the shorter age gaps between siblings. And during the pivotal years of early childhood, there are sort of four major characteristics that we consider for sibling relationships. And the first is that sibling interactions are emotionally charged relationships defined by strong, uninhibited emotions of positive and negative, and sometimes ambivalent quality. Secondly, sibling relationships are defined by intimacy. Young children spend large amount of times playing together. They get to know each other very well and develop those very strong, intimate bonds. And that long history and intimate knowledge translates into opportunities to provide emotional and instrumental support for one another, whether that's engaging in pretend play as children, all the way up to learning about conflict resolution and understanding other points of views outside of your own perspective. Third, sibling relationships are characterized by large individual differences in the quality of children's interactions with one another. And fourth, the age difference between siblings makes the issues of power and control, as well as rivalry and jealousy, sources of contention for children, but also provides a context for more positive types of complementary exchanges, such as teaching, helping, and caregiving interactions as well, which can be a whole host of new learning opportunities in early childhood. And so with that in mind, it's reasonable to consider that these relationships have a strong influence on the overall development of children. And research has actually supported that sibling relationships are essentially a natural laboratory for young children to learn about their world. It's a safe and secure place for them to learn how to interact with others who are interesting and engaging playmates, but also learn how to manage those disagreements that often occur in sibling relationships and regulate both positive and negative emotions in a socially acceptable way. So importantly, the engagement does not occur without the presence of conflict, as I'm sure most of you have either experienced as a sibling or observed in your own children. And so in accordance with their developmental level, sibling conflicts are usually frequent and often poorly resolved on their own. And this typically influences a parent to want to intervene immediately to mediate the conflict. And on the one hand, stepping in and resolving conflicts may actually deprive children of the opportunity to develop conflict resolution strategies on their own and make conflicts worse. But on the other hand, intervention may be necessary and sometimes can make conflicts less intense and lead to more constructive resolutions. And so what we consider in the research is that the structuring and negotiation process can be left to the parents, where the final resolution is presented as a promising way for children to improve conflict outcomes while simultaneously helping them understand one another and develop more constructive resolution strategies as they develop. And so additionally, one of the most important considerations of the sibling relationship is how it differs from the parent-child relationship. And so generally speaking, a parent-child relationship is going to be a lot more care and compassion driven. And a child learns a lot from their parent in that relationship, but it involves a very different type of social lesson. And there are many opportunities for young children to develop an understanding of social relationships with family members that may be close and loving at some times, but also nasty and aggressive at other times, as siblings can be. And those opportunities for them to use their cognitive skills to convince others of a point of view, teach them, imitate them, all of those things create positive benefits for establishing a warm and positive sibling relationship that lasts a lifetime. And really the balance for young children, as I'm sure, again, you can all have seen in your own children, is finding that balance between the positive and negative aspects of their interactions and how those develop over time. And so kind of equipped now with that knowledge and the general overview of sibling relationships, we can shift gears to kind of talk about the impact that chronic illness and disabilities has on those sibling relationships. And so it's really important, again, to consider that the chronic illness of a child can absolutely affect their sibling relationships. while the child with the diagnosis and the parents are making some very extreme life adjustments and having to do a lot of coping and structuring of what's going to happen going forward, life changes for the entire family. And so justifiably, parents pay extra attention to the child with a chronic illness or disability, and brothers and sisters can sometimes feel a little bit less in the shining light there. And so they might have difficulty learning to live with the stresses of having a sibling with a chronic illness or disability. And so with that in mind, it can be a powerful tool to understand some of the feelings that siblings may be harboring in the context of their sibling's diagnosis, with some of the most common being guilt. Why my sibling and not me? Why our family? Wondering about whether or not they might have caused the sibling's illness. Sometimes in those early years of not understanding the cause and effect, they can think having a fight or wishing something negative upon their sibling created the actual diagnosis. There can be an air of anxiety about becoming ill themselves or other members of their family becoming ill. Jealousy and wishing they could be the ones to be sort of the center of the family's attention. There's also further guilt associated if they harbor any resentment toward their sibling for the increased attention or them having to pick up additional household chores or responsibilities or duties that aren't necessarily common of typically developing sibling relationships. And there's an air of embarrassment or loneliness that can come from being in public and thinking that people are talking about you and your sibling or people at school, but also an air of anger if they observe other people bullying or teasing their sibling and wanting to kind of step in to provide that caregiver protective support that's common in sibling relationships. And then certainly sadness and worry about the future and how their sibling's chronic illness or disability will affect their life, their parents' life, and their own life, especially as they get older and have a little bit more of that thinking forward type of processing. And so what's important is that the actual feelings siblings might have toward their sibling with the diagnosis or the situation itself doesn't always look flat out like these easily listed items. It can actually look a lot like warning signs that have nothing to do with the actual word itself, but a lot to do with the behaviors that you might see. And so we always like to make parents aware of some of the warning signs that siblings of a child with a chronic health condition or disability may need some extra attention. And that can look like anxiety and depression. It can look like being withdrawn, maybe not communicating as effectively or as frequently as they had previously. Anger, even if it doesn't seem to be associated with their sibling or the family in general, the outburst of anger that might increase. Losing interest in friends or activities that they really enjoy doing poorly in school or having a really hard time concentrating on their schooling. Pushing too hard to achieve, wanting to be constantly pleasing their parents, wanting to be constantly doing all of the things that make them stand out from the rest of their peer group. On the contrary, rebellion can also be a common sign of difficulty to adjust, whether that is just outwardly breaking rules set for them or pushing their boundaries, pushing their limits. Again, losing interest in activities that once brought pleasure, like their sports, their music, things they could perceive as being a burden on the family or being something that they don't have time for or energy for. And then acting out in other ways to get attention from parents, from other caregivers, and whoever else in their life they're seeking that attention from. And so again, these are typical warning signs that there is some sort of difficulty adjusting to life with a sibling with a chronic condition. Importantly, doesn't always look consistent. These can jump around. There can be bouts of total peace, and then out of nowhere, it can seem like these types of behaviors are just showing up with no warning, with no sort of predictor, no trigger, but they can happen at any time. They can shift around, they can move around, and they can change over the developmental span of a child's life as well. So considering all of these things, it's important to know that there are certainly ways that you can support siblings moving forward with whatever their adjustments are. So first, it's really important to remember that every family will learn how to embrace and show love for a child with chronic health conditions or disabilities. And there's no right way or wrong way for siblings to live and grow together. Rather, every family should strive for its own balance and determine some strategies and supports that will help their child with the chronic condition, as well as the siblings to thrive and be resilient. And so with that in mind, just try to be aware that while attending to the needs of a child with a chronic health condition, the siblings can present those feelings of being neglected. They can feel as though the attention isn't where it is equal and fair. And so it is important for siblings to participate in the family as much as possible and learn to feel pride and love in being a part of this family and being a part of the care and the balance of having a sibling with a chronic condition. And so the presence of a family member with a chronic illness actually does provide opportunities for siblings to have increased empathy, responsibility, adaptability, problem solving, and creativity. And this has been supported by research. And to ensure a sibling feels included, some of the things we most recommend are trying to establish some balance between the needs of your child with a chronic condition or disability and those of your other children. This can be done by spending some quality time with siblings individually and having relationships outside of the context of a child's diagnosis. So keeping those things separate when possible to develop those relationships that don't have a context of the child's child with a chronic condition or disability. And also keep in mind that it's really important for siblings to have honest and accurate information about the condition of their sibling in order for them to truly feel included and to truly feel like they have the tools they need to adjust to a life with a sibling with a chronic condition. They need honest, accurate, and developmentally appropriate information about the diagnosis, about the treatment, and being included in whatever the new updates are as these things progress. And so we always, of course, like to give ourselves a little plug in these types of situations. So wherever you are in the country, if there is a children's hospital, there is almost certainly a child life department. While we consider ourselves essential to the care teams of hospitals, it's not always guaranteed that families are aware that child life exists as a resource, but we certainly do. And so with the inclusion of a child life specialist, we're available to assist siblings and family members directly at the hospital if you're in a hospitalization circumstance, or also by offering suggestions for coping at home. Here in St. Louis, we have our child life department at St. Louis Children's Hospital, and we are available and accessible to any family. Although I know several of you have traveled from out of state, you are still always welcome to contact us for support. What we can do is provide developmentally appropriate education. We know that sometimes it can be really overwhelming to be kind of learning yourselves about diagnoses, about treatments, about all of these things and understanding them in the context that they're given to you. And so our job, one of our little nicknames that we call ourselves are tiny human interpreters. So we take those medical terms, we take those medical treatments, and we translate them in a way that is going to be developmentally appropriate to explain to a child at any point in the lifespan, from as early as toddler all the way through to our young adults, that we can help explain what's going on in a way that A, makes sense to them, but B, gives them the opportunity to correct misconceptions that they might have and feel a part of the process all along. We know that that can be a large task for you to take on top of everything else that you're dealing with your child with a chronic health condition. So know that child life specialists exist to help take that burden off of you. Our expertise being in developmentally appropriate terminology for these things means that we have the tools ready to help support you in this. We also always provide a lot of coping tools for siblings, things that can help them to learn how to adjust, how to be a part of their sibling's life in a way that makes them feel both included and having pride in being a part of that family. And those are things that we can support through whatever is developmentally appropriate, from a young child kind of being a helper to an older child taking on more of that caregiver and protective role, if that's what they so choose to do, and giving them space to express themselves, to ask questions, and to share some of those harder feelings that might be a little bit intimidating to share with your parents. And so those are things that we can offer. I have our contact information up here as far as a phone number if you ever want to reach out to us. But you can also reach me via email at any time, and I will have that on these handouts that I do have available. This first handout is a bit of a resource packet that has first kind of an overview of what I've talked about today, kind of the common reactions to look for, warning signs, ways that you can help. And then it does have my contact information at the bottom. It also includes a resource that I love to give families who are dealing with chronic health conditions, because sometimes it can feel like there's only negatives to having a sibling with a chronic health condition, when in fact there are actually unusual opportunities for children who are siblings of a child with special needs, who they can learn things that are very beneficial to their development, despite some of the challenges that also accompany it. So that's a really great resource for that. And then for if and when you experience hospitalization, we like to include some of the common reactions to hospitalization that different developmental ages will experience, so that they are aware of what to expect if you do have to be hospitalized with your child. And then finally, just a little flyer that has some resources for you to consider moving forward. One of my favorites is the Sibling Support Project. It's a national organization that provides support for siblings of children with chronic health conditions. They have tons of virtual and online opportunities, but they also do have in-person support groups in almost every state, and then all across the world as well. So it's a really great opportunity for siblings to have support from their peers and things that are expressly made for them, as well as some book recommendations. I do actually have a couple of them with me today. My name is Jack, and My Many Colored Days. I have copies of both of those if you want to take a look, but otherwise you're more than welcome to take one of these flyers or one of these packets with you, and always feel free to contact me if you have any other questions or need any additional support for your siblings. That's all I've got.
Thank you, Mary. Yeah, we're going to pass some of those resources out if there's an interest, since she's got them. Well, that wraps up our general session programming today, but that's not the end of the fun. We've got our breakout sessions this afternoon. I know on the agenda it says after the breakout session, we'll come back into this room. We don't really have that many closing remarks, so I don't think it's necessary to get everybody back here after the breakout. So before we get out in the breakouts, Emily, I don't know if you have any closing words or anything you want to say to folks real quick.
I just want to say thank you all so much for coming. It means the world to Alice and Duke and Stephen and I, for you guys to all be together with us in community. And I feel really privileged to have gotten to know a lot of you on an individual level. And so just so thankful to be together with you guys this weekend. Thank you so much for coming.
From the breakout session perspective, each breakout session is going to run 45 minutes. So if you're going to go up to a breakout session, the first one starts about 2:15. For facilitators of breakout sessions, we ask that you keep an eye on the clock. At 3 o'clock, wrap the breakout, give people 15 minutes to go to the second breakout session that they want to. Caring for the caregiver will be in room 303. IEPs and exclusive education will be in room 301. Supporting social relationships will be in the great room. Deep brain stimulation will also be in the great room. I don't know which is which. I think this is great room B. Okay. Yeah, we're just going to segment the room. So if you're interested in either of those topics, I should note the deep brain stimulation conversation will only happen during the first 45 minutes of the breakout session due to travel. And then out and about, Brandy and Leanne and Bob will talk about their experience with AAC in room 308 and 310. If you have any questions, we're here for you, but thanks for being here. We appreciate it. And I've reminded, we didn't say goodbye to the folks on Zoom. Thanks for bearing with us on the internet today. We appreciate it. We had about 17 people join, so it's a great use of technology. Thanks.